This video is brought to you by Squarespace. If you wish to learn how to develop your own website and take your business to the next level, then stay tuned for more details. Despite the fact that I wasn't even alive during the height of this era, gaming in the late 90s is something I have a feeling of nostalgia for. The Nintendo 64 and its library of iconic genre-defining games against Sony's new PlayStation with its own roster of iconic games. Sega also had their Saturn console, but I don't think that's super relevant in the discussion of the 5th gen console war. As I was saying, it was an era where developers had to learn the basics all over again, now that games had shifted towards being 3D, which was right after the era where 2D gaming was perfected on the Super Nintendo and Sega Genesis. It's got a real charm to it. I mean, how can you not feel nostalgic when seeing that PlayStation 1 boot-up screen? I also did grow up with some PS1 games. I played the Crash games as a kid, and in a previous video I did mention that my uncle made me the custodian of his PlayStation 1, and with that I now own the games we used to play on it, like the Tomb Raider games or Tekken 2. Good times. But now I'm just rambling about PS1 nostalgia. We're here to talk about X games. Mega Man and the SNES had a really fantastic track record. In terms of the classic series, despite coming out late, Mega Man 7 was a pretty ballin' game. The main course, though, was the Mega Man X series, 3 of my favorite games of all time. All 4 of these games were really damn good. The series even got some spin-offs back then, like Mega Man Soccer on SNES, and a remaster as Mega Man 1 through 3 came on the Sega Genesis as the Wily Wars. Point being that during the 4th generation, Mega Man was eating pretty well. Looking ahead to the next generation, the Mega Man series jumped to the new hardware alongside all the other developers, unlike how they went about going from the NES to the SNES. Mega Man 8 released on the PlayStation and Sega Saturn in 1996 and used the technology provided to them for new FMV cutscenes and better graphics than ever before seen in Mega Man. In 1997, we got both Mega Man Legends, the start of a new Mega Man series that actually took advantage of the PS1 tech for a fully 3D Mega Man game. Well, it wasn't like any other Mega Man game, but still, it was 3D. And we also got Mega Man X4 on the PlayStation 1, which sought out to do for the X series what Mega Man 8 did for the classics. This being the first Mega Man X game where Mega Man is spelled as one word. Mega Man. I don't know, something about that is just wrong to me. Look across all my videos on the subject, I always put a space between Mega and Man. It just looks wrong any other way. Even though other heroes like Batman, Superman, they're always spelled as one word. Well, I guess Spider-Man's got the hyphen, but you know what I'm trying to say. Even at that, the series itself goes back and forth on this. But in Japan, it's pretty consistent for Rockman to just be one word, unlike the madness going on in America, where Mega Man 8 shows it as 2 words on the box, but 1 word on the title screen. Seriously, what a madhouse. I've never done a comment of the day, but if there ever was a time, it would be right now. How do you spell Mega Man? Let me know below. But, what was I talking about? Oh yes, Mega Man X4. This is a pretty banging game. What else do you expect? These new videos have all been about how great these first 4 X games are. With that said, in today's video we're going to go into all the reasons why Mega Man X4 is yet another perfect Mega Man X game. Mega Man X4. I see no better place to start than with the biggest talking point for my review on Mega Man X1, Next Generation Appeal. Visually, I think Mega Man X4 looks absolutely fantastic. It's obviously a jump up from the Super Nintendo games, as the sprites all have much more detail, the game opens with an FMV, there are these cutscenes to tell the story, but looking past that stuff, X4 just looks very appealing. To me, going from X3 to X4 is no different than Mega Man 6 to X1, where the intro stage pulls out all the stops with these flashing lights, moving parts in the background, destruction in the foreground. But the game never lets up with that. You see the rushing water and rainbows and web spiders stage, the looping background of Split Mushroom stage that created the illusion of this big staircase, the lava and magma dragoons level, the amount of lasers they crammed on screen in Storm Owl's stage, and so on. This game is loaded with colorful sprites, backgrounds, and effects, to the point where I feel like Mega Man X4 is a game that still looks appealing as far as sprite-based games are concerned. Then there's the music. Mega Man X3 got ported to the PlayStation, and that gave us a taste of what the music could be like on PS1, and I'd say the soundtrack of X4 doesn't disappoint. It's definitely not my favorite Mega Man X soundtrack. Hell, I'd even say this is the weakest X soundtrack on the PlayStation 1, but still, it's no slouch. Given different vibes for each stage, but making sure the tracks are absolute bops nonetheless. Like listen to X's opening stage, or Slash Beast and Magma Dragoon, hopefully you'll see what I mean. Now, earlier I mentioned Mega Man X4 was released on the PlayStation 1, but I should say that it was also released on the Sega Saturn. I know I said that console wasn't relevant earlier, but I just meant in terms of the console wars. Anyway, I had actually never played X4 on the Saturn before now. I think most people would agree that Mega Man 8 on Saturn is the definitive version since it includes an extra boss fight and properly looped music, but I don't know, I'll have to wait for my Mega Man 8 video to give a definitive stance on this because I've never played it there. After playing X4 on Saturn, I'll say this: the load times are a little faster and the music sounds better and properly looped. On PlayStation, these games will play the music, but once the track is over, it just stops and then starts again. I'd say it takes longer to reload in X3 compared to X4, so that's an improvement, but on Saturn, they naturally keep the track going. But otherwise, I think the PlayStation 1 version actually wins out for me, which is thanks to a couple of small details. The PS1 just handled transparency a lot better than the Saturn. Look at when X and Zero dash in this game. On the PlayStation, you get a semi-transparent effect behind them, but on Saturn, it's just a solid blue and a solid red. These lights in the intro stage look that way as well, but then on Saturn, it's a block of dithering worthy of the EXO song parody. The FMVs are lower quality on Saturn as well, the voice clips and sound effects are more muffled compared to the PS1 version, and for those reasons, I just think the PlayStation 1 version is the definitive way to play X4. But the Saturn version does have these cool heatwave effects during the second half of the intro stage and Magma Dragoon's level, so that's something cool the PlayStation 1 version doesn't have, right? Either way, I think X4 is fantastic from a visual standpoint. It's just got such a sleek appearance in its UI, the HUD, and all the things we mentioned already like the sprite work. And speaking of sleek designs, let's talk about Squarespace, who is the sponsor of today's video. If you're a creative type who has work to show off to the world, whether it be art, music, or video making like me, having a well-designed website is a pretty critical part of the process. Squarespace offers users an incredibly simple to understand way of building their own website. What makes it so easy to use is the fact that they offer a plethora of different template websites to build yours off of, as you can click a few options that best describe your website's goals and they'll give you the templates that work best, or you could just start from scratch. Either way, you have plenty of options to work with once you actually get in, including dozens of different fonts, plenty of color schemes you can pick from to make your website unique to you, even letting you use your own images to design a color palette, which is how I created this Jay's Reviews themed palette. And there's an option to embed links to other websites, such as your other social media accounts, which would be crucial for someone who works on YouTube, for example. All this was made possible by Squarespace. For a free trial, go to squarespace.com. When you're ready to launch, go to squarespace.com/jaysreviews for a 10% discount on your first purchase. Once again, that's squarespace.com/jaysreviews, and you can find that at the top of the description or by scrolling down checking out the pinned comment. Thanks again to Squarespace for sponsoring this video. Now, let's get back to the show. What I find super interesting is that I was just giving X4 praise because of its visual design, but if you look back, while the console ports of X4 did get overall positive reception, the critics were not very impressed by the fact that Mega Man X4 continued to be a 2D side-scroller instead of a full 3D platformer, which was all the rage at the time. It's the same attitude from the infamous magazine article that showed Castlevania 64 as a positive example next to Symphony of the Night on PlayStation, when the legacies of these two games are completely reversed. Simply put, back when games were evolving so much, games like X4 didn't feel fresh or new, and at worst were seen as being stuck in the past. So much so, Sony even had a policy against 2D games and RPGs on PlayStation in the early days. You can thank Bernie Stolar for that one. That's the guy who later left Sony and went to Sega and then played a part in sinking the Saturn in the West by saying the Saturn is not our future a full 2 years and some months before the release of the Dreamcast. Mega Man 8 sold really well, but from what I read, it was still a fight for Capcom to even get X4 on PS1 because of the no 2D policy. Thank goodness he left Sony. I mean, can you imagine a PS1 where we barely got games like X4 or Final Fantasy VII because they're 2D or an RPG? It's insane to me. 10 years after a game like X4, nostalgia will be much more prevalent in game design and still is today, but in the late 90s, not so much. It's a good thing Capcom managed to get these games out though, because I actually think X4 and Mega Man 8 do gain a lot from being on PS1. I just spent a solid chunk of time praising the art style of these games. They put 5th gen tech to use to make their 2D games look really slick, when many other games from this era have visually held up like garbage. But anyway, it's time to get into the game. In X4, you can pick one of the two campaigns of the title screen, the first of them obviously being Mega Man X. But now, Zero is a fully implemented playable character with his own campaign. The two campaigns and Zero's playstyle being the big innovations of X4. To set up some context, in the year 21XX, there exists a Reploid army called the Repliforce. Sigma tries getting Repliforce's general, named General, to turn against humans since they don't have Reploids' best interests at heart, and the Maverick Hunters are all too happy to obey them. Repliforce won't do it, so Sigma tries a different tactic. He causes a floating city, the Sky Lagoon, to crash where Repliforce was stationed, so when X or Zero investigate, they say Repliforce should come in and explain their side of the story, and when they won't, the Repliforce is labeled Maverick, which begins a war between the Maverick Hunters and the Repliforce, as the latter declares their independence from humans. To add to the shuffle, X has a new partner named Double, while Zero is aided by Iris, who's the sister of Repliforce's Colonel. So all kinds of drama going on here, but we can save the story discussion for later. I just wanted to establish the situation before diving into the gameplay. Structurally, little has changed about X4. I mean, there are 8 new Maverick stages to beat, do that and you can play the final levels. In the X3 review, I said that nothing had changed about being X between X2 and X3. On paper, nothing has changed between X3 and X4 as well. In X4, X can still do everything he could before, like wall jump, dash, charge his shots, and the list goes on. But it just feels different to play. The PlayStation Mega Man X games handle slightly differently to the ones on the Super Nintendo. The biggest reason why is because of the fact that on SNES you could mash the dash button for repeat dashes. In X4, the dash animation has more frames of build-up and more frames of cooldown than on the SNES. I think the extra detail is great and the animations of the dash coming to a stop look good, but this does mean there's a slight delay if you're mashing the dash button. So when I play the PS1 X games, what I do is just dash jump as much as possible, and as you can see here, it keeps the momentum up, when I just spam the dash button in the SNES games. It's not really a big deal, just a change I thought warranted a mention. X is the go-to character for newcomers to this game since he's the long-ranged fighter of the two, and I'm partial to his style. However, the star attraction of X4 is definitely Zero's gameplay. In X3, Zero served as a bigger and slower X. X4 has completely revamped the character, debuting a style that would become a Mega Man staple, the 3/saber combat. Zero doesn't even use his Z-Buster in X4. Instead, you need to get up close to the enemies and slash them with Zero's Z-Saber, where you get 3 fast and well-animated saber swings. Each swing does a decent amount of damage and has a good range. In particular, the final part of the combo covering your immediate area really well. In the air, you also get a rapid slash attack that also has good coverage. Zero can't swing on the move, you have to stop and then slash, but I think that's a tiny issue in the grand scheme of things, as his gameplay is really satisfying otherwise as you just slash through everything that stands before you. My favorite kind of game. As you should all know by now. But Zero's style only gets better from that baseline. A well-known strat that I actually uncovered by accident is saber dash canceling. You can mash the dash button and the saber button at the same time, and this allows you to repeat the first saber slash over and over instead of having to commit to the combo, which does great damage on bosses like Magma Dragoon or Slash Beast. X5 gave Zero a power-up that removes your ability to dash cancel, but X6 on the other hand made dash canceling the easiest of all the games as Zero's animations got retooled in the way that made this easier to pull off. When beating bosses, Zero gets abilities like X does, but instead of being weapons you must equip, Zero gets new moves you can chain into his combat, like this upward strike from Magma Dragoon that covers a huge area, or this downward stab from Frost Walrus, the lightning strike from Web Spider, and best of all, the double jump and spinning Z-Saber attack from Split Mushroom. The spinning attack replaces your standard aerial swing as you obliterate everything in your path. I mean, just look at what this does to Slash Beast's stage. All of Zero's techniques can be put to great use when tearing the enemies apart. These are activated with specific button combos, like the Rising Fire Slash where you press up on the D-pad plus the special weapons button on triangle. You can then do the downward strike by pressing down and triangle. Because of this free-flowing combat, I think Zero is great in X4, which is why this gameplay of his continued to come back in so many Mega Man games. It's not fully Devil May Cry levels of based, but it is a stepping stone towards the Mega Man Zero series where players could really go combo mad all over the enemies and bosses. Of course, X unlocks special weapons from beating bosses, but I feel like his roster doesn't compare to Zero's. I don't think there would even be a way to program intuitive button combos for a lot of X's weapons anyway, so I'm not mad about that, but equipping each weapon still takes time that isn't there for Zero. The real thing is that I just wish X's weapons did more damage. On the whole, I felt like using my Buster was stronger, as special weapons either didn't do that much damage or they just got deflected by the enemies. Now, I'm sure a Mega Man player much better than me could pull this off pretty well. However, in my playthroughs, I only ever find a select few moments where X's weapons come in handy in a combat scenario. Otherwise, it's the same deal as X2, where I just use the weapons to get items. All this would be pointless without fun stages though, right? Luckily, X4 isn't playing around in this category. The level design is where I thought X3 lacked the most, mainly because the game didn't capitalize on all of its opportunities to have a memorable set piece like X1 and X2. X4 fixes this by making players navigate through a variety of different situations, like timing your jumps between these platforms in Magma Dragoon stage while these magma rocks fall between them, timing your jumps in Web Spider stage while these logs go down the waterfall, having to escape this room before the platforms crumble in Split Mushrooms level, needing to reach the end of these rooms within a certain time in Cyber Peacock stage, and just getting to destroy everything that stands before you in Slash Beast or Storm Owl's levels. Each one putting the dash and wall jump to great use as you need to be precise with your movements. The levels are also paced very well. If it's getting samey, they'll throw in a ride armor to mix it up. If you've seen the same gimmick too many times, the level will transition into the second half where you do something different, like go through the trees in Web Spider, flipping gravity in Cyber Peacock stage, or positioning yourself carefully on this elevator in Split Mushrooms level. The only stage I don't really care for is Jet Stingrays. Here, the ride chaser mechanic from X2 makes a comeback, only now we see it used as part of this mini-game where you have to dodge obstacles or die. I'm pretty good at this stage now, but on my first several playthroughs I always thought it was a massive pace breaker. Besides that one stage, every time I play X4, one of the leading takeaways is that this is an incredibly solid set of levels. Honestly, some of the best the X series has ever seen. Designing obstacles that are balanced well around the two characters. It's all about whether you prefer getting in close or shooting from a distance in combat. Other than that, the levels are fun to play as both X and Zero, with a well-designed item game on top of that. You might think that 4 games in you know what to expect, but some things have actually changed here. We still have 8 heart tanks with 1 located in each stage, but the number of sub-tanks has been cut from 4 to 2. I think this is fair. The more I play these games, the less I even use the sub-tanks, so having 4 of them in X1 to X3 makes it so that I'm really never under any threat of dying. With X4, when I get to the final boss, I usually need both of my sub-tanks, and when they're gone, I'll need to play carefully or else I'll have wasted them. So this is a good change. In the place of the other 2 sub-tanks, you have the weapon energy tank, which is the same as a sub-tank, but it refills your weapon energy. This one is iffy. It's not a bad idea, but the problem is that weapon ammo is basically useless in X4 for a reason I can get into in just a second. Zero doesn't even have weapons that use up an ammo count, besides the one he gets from Cyber Peacock, but you can refill that via taking damage, so the weapon energy tank is a useless grab for Zero. In that very same stage, both characters can grab the EX tank, which raises your life count from 2 to 4 upon getting a game over. Meh, this one also is a decent idea, but X4 introduces a new system where getting a game over only brings you to the halfway point of a stage, so I don't feel like it makes that much of a difference. These 2 new tanks were both fine ideas, they just don't mesh that well with the other X4 systems. As usual, X can collect Dr. Light capsules, these containing the 4 parts of, you guessed it, the 4th armor. The leg parts allow you to air dash yet again, but the new function is this hover ability that you have for a couple seconds. I don't think this is as good as the upward dash from X3, but it does have its uses like in the final boss, or if you need to correct yourself while platforming. I've been setting this up for the last couple of videos, but the designers have seemingly always had a problem making the head parts useful, so here they just said screw it and made it really OP. X3's reduced weapon ammo use, but in X4 you just straight up have infinite ammo. Might as well call it the Solid Snake capsule next time.
Infinite ammo.
Charging your weapon still takes ammo, but regular shots are infinite. I'm not complaining. I think it's pretty cool to run through Spaceport as X with infinite ammo in the Twin Slasher. It's like the enemies are lined up for it. The arm parts are an interesting situation. There are actually 2 of them in this game, located in the same spot. One of them allows you to charge up 4 blasts that you can release whenever you want. The other is the plasma shot, which fires a big ball of energy that lingers on screen, continuing to destroy enemies. This one's my preference. Don't like the red arms it gives you. Not a good match for the rest of the armor's color scheme, but I'll take it if it means getting the plasma shot. A lot of people do prefer the other one, which is fine. I just don't like the fact that the damage on it isn't that high, and on bosses you have to wait for iframes to end before firing another shot. While I'm on the subject of the arm parts, I'm just going to point out something I noticed. In X1 to X3, the arm parts will give you an additional charge shot that comes after the 2 levels you already had, meaning you could still do the regular charge shot if you wanted to. In X4, the arm parts just replace the second charge shot. Just something I noticed. The body parts have the usual effect of reducing damage on you, but this can be converted into the Nova Strike, a horizontal dash where you destroy all enemies and gain a decent amount of distance. It's cool. Really, it's impossible to make a bad body armor part, so that's all fine and good. With all these pieces laid out, how's the routing in X4? This is the final Mega Man X game where I even care enough to talk about a leashed backtracking run. Spoiler alert, the design problems of X5 and X6 make it worthless, X7 sucks anyway so it doesn't matter, and X8 is a game I haven't played enough to even think about it. Back on target, X4 doesn't have any of that convoluted stuff like ride armors, enhancement chips, superpower moves, secret castle unlocks, and so on. It's pretty simple actually. The run I have in the books goes Magma Dragoon, Web Spider, Frost Walrus, Jet Stingray, Slash Beast, Split Mushroom, Cyber Peacock, Storm Owl, and then backtrack to Magma Dragoon for the body parts. Here's the beautiful part of it though. That's one way to do it, but for this video I just did something completely different. Slash Beast is more fun with the plasma shot, so I went with Storm Owl first. In X4, there are very few item requirements needed to get its collectibles. You need Rising Fire to get the heart tank of Web Spider, you need his weapon to get the arm parts in the EX tank, you need Rising Fire for the Frost Walrus heart tank, and a charged Twin Slasher for the body parts. Everything else is either something you can find or just takes precision to get. The best kind of MMX item quest is it creates maximum variety. So you can use this as a template, but ultimately you can do almost any order you want in X4, just as long as it starts with the 2 stages I have at the top. I mean, really, I didn't follow this religiously when recording this footage, and not even by design. I just went in an order where I'd get all the items with a minimal amount of backtracking, which just so happened to be different from the one I wrote out a long time ago. Again, maximum variety and freedom, the best kind of Mega Man X item game. I still find X2 a little more rewarding in this category because the X Hunters require you to strategize a little more, and you can do that one with no backtracks. But saying which item game is more varied between X2 and X4 is splitting hairs at the end of the day. X4 even makes up for the one backtrack as X, since as Zero you don't have any light capsules to collect, so you can do this in almost any order you want with no backtracking in sight. I go after Split Mushroom as Zero much earlier than I do as X because then I can get the double jump and spinning Z-Saber attack. I decided to make a separate image for Zero since the run is so different. It goes like this: Magma Dragoon, Web Spider, Split Mushroom, Frost Walrus, Slash Beast, Cyber Peacock, Storm Owl, and Jet Stingray. As Zero, you just need Dragoon's weapon to get the heart tank of Web Spider and Frost Walrus, and the double jump from Split Mushroom to get the EX tank. Now, the next thing on the Mega Man X checklist is if the bosses are fun to fight, and in X4 we have a roster of winners. Without special weapons, each boss is a very readable pattern that you can learn with practice. Web Spider might catch you in his web the first time you fight him, but you learn what angles to dash jump from to avoid it. Same goes for the homing missile from Cyber Peacock. Every boss is like that, seeing you learn patterns and angles to best avoid taking damage. One of the reasons I like starting with Magma Dragoon is the fact that you can actually bring a right armor into the fight and beat the crap out of this boss. He has a lot of cool attacks to avoid, even including the Hadouken and the Shoryuken. Although, I guess he didn't learn them from Dr. Light because they don't kill you in one hit. As Zero, all of that still applies, and even when using techniques, I'd say most of Zero's bosses are fun to fight. Slash Beast takes the most damage from Zero's lightning attack, but this move leaves you vulnerable to damage as he won't get stun locked by it. If you want to use Jet Stingray's weakness on him, you need to combine the double jump with the ice attack. You need to get creative since not everything Zero unlocks is a weapon usable on another boss. All around a great roster of bosses. Assuming you aren't using X's special weapons, which ruins them all yet again. X's campaign does get a bonus fight though. 4 stages in, you'll have to face the Colonel at Repliforce's, well, I was gonna say base, but I guess it's their, meeting place? I don't know. This fight is really fun. The attacks he throws at you are very readable, you just need to dodge with the right timing and strike when he won't block you. Having said that, we've reached the final stages, and to be honest, I don't really have that much to say about it. The final levels of X4 consist of 3 stages as the Repliforce is taking off to space. The first level is at their spaceport, a quick level that makes use of all your weapons really well, ending with a Colonel rematch for X and the first time you face him as Zero. Beating the Colonel doesn't change anything as the Repliforce has gone to their space colony called the Final Weapon. This being a pretty unremarkable final level. You run through some rooms, fight a character-specific boss, you get a room that splits in 2 that both house some pretty basic platforming, and then you battle the General. This being a fight that isn't great. It's this big room where, as X, I just climbed to the left wall and spam charge shots hoping I hit him, and as Zero, I used to cling to the wall until he came to my side and then slashed, but a Patreon Discord server member told me that a regular slash from this distance does this much damage. Don't know why, but it's neat. Even with these strats, I still think this is a weak boss as it takes a long time and he spends most of it off screen anyway. This just isn't a great final stage, which is disappointing since most all the levels leading up to this were great. What I do like about the final stages would be the music. The spaceport has this really urgent vibe to it, while the Final Weapon has more of a lonely atmosphere as you're trapped in space. The actual last level begins a trope I hate even more than a boss rush. A boss rush that comes right before the final battle. My worst nightmare. You know the drill. Refight the same 8 bosses over again for 10 minutes, complete with explosion scenes that make up half of it. Then you get the final battle where X or Zero learn that Sigma was the one responsible for this whole thing. Which reminds me, at this point I was mashing through the text so much that I accidentally skipped this important cutscene with Sigma and Zero, so guess who had to do the entire boss rush again? But I suppose now is finally the time to talk more about the story in X4. Just by summarizing it earlier, it's pretty clear that more effort got put into the story of this game compared to the previous ones. I mean, we've got 2 warring sides that don't even want to fight each other, whose strings are being pulled by a mysterious figure in the background. It's a cool idea, especially with conflicting interests on both sides, as Zero cares for Iris, who cares for him, but is also the sister of Colonel. Not bad ideas. They even bothered paying attention to the smaller details. Magma Dragoon was once a Maverick Hunter but defected to Sigma's side. He was the one who caused the Sky Lagoon to fall so that Repliforce could be set up. So when you fight him, his health bar shows the Sigma logo instead of the Repliforce one, as do Split Mushroom and Cyber Peacock, meaning that they're really loyal to Sigma's cause and not Repliforce's. Again, this is all good stuff, but the problem is that the game doesn't really put the work in to make you actually care about any of this. Dragoon, for example, is a character we saw for 2 seconds before finding out he was a bad guy. Or worse, Iris, someone Zero has affection for. We only know this because it's said. The characters barely interact and she's a new character for this game, so you feel almost nothing when they have to fight in the final level. Speaking of Zero, I should mention that this game put him in the spotlight much more than previous games. I mean, his playthrough has more cutscenes than X's, and X only even physically appears in one of his cutscenes. A cutscene that also includes Zero. But anyway, this game decided to stop hinting at it. It's fully confirmed at the start of Zero's campaign that Zero was the final creation of Dr. Albert Wily, the main villain of the classic Mega Man series. Meaning he was created for destruction but doesn't know about his past. It all comes to him as a violent dream. At the end of the game, Sigma tells Zero a story from back when he was leading the Maverick Hunters before the events of X1. Zero was discovered and was a brutal killing machine, almost beating Sigma, ultimately being the reason Sigma has the scars that he has on his face. But when Sigma knocked Zero out, his personality reset, and that's how we have the Zero we know today. I'm assuming in the Prime universe that this is when Sigma started going rogue. Speaking of whom, Sigma's also in this game, which will confuse a lot of players since X3 made it look like he was dead for good. Although that's actually not true. He says his program is fading and that he will come back. Something well established at this point since the virus had exploded in X2 and he came back in X3. Sigma always comes back. When the artists created Sigma in X1, they wanted him to be the embodiment of pure evil, no redeeming characteristics whatsoever. Unlike Dr. Wily, who's kind of a funny character at the end of the day. The stories of X3 and X4 do a good job showing that fact about Sigma, since he turns forces for good like Dr. Doppler and Repliforce into, well, the opposite of that, and then tosses them aside with no regard when they've served their purpose. In X4's case, he got the Maverick Hunters and Repliforce to fight, and I was thinking, Sigma would probably want that because it will show Reploids who are unsure of their place in the world why they should join him. I mean, the Repliforce tried declaring independence from humans, and look what the Maverick Hunters did to them. But of course, Sigma in X4 is impossible to take seriously, like the artists wanted, because of the story's most infamous aspect. The localization of this game is quite the sight to behold. The PS1 gave the developers the ability to include voice acting in the cutscenes, and well, everything is wrong. The casting doesn't work, the direction is awful, and the delivery of lines is just as bad. I think X4 definitely belongs in the conversation for some of the worst acting in any AAA game. Watching these cutscenes, it's impossible to not burst out laughing because it's genuinely that poorly done.
Without fear, for we are the Repliforce.
The most powerful army in history!
And now, my Maverick Hunters, what will you do? I'll be watching closely from here on out. I'm disappointed in you, Colonel.
What do you think you're doing?
It's not too late. Stop the coup now.
Never.
If that's your decision, prepare yourself! Iris! Ah! No, this isn't happening! There's no reason for me to go on. What? What am I fighting for?
I have nothing against anyone who worked on this, it's just a product of its time to say the absolute least. Special shout out to this scene in X's playthrough where Double goes rogue and the game turns into a Sam Raimi horror film for a minute.
Commander X, please respond.
This is X. What happened? Report.
Nothing to worry about.
No further transmissions unless necessary to carry out the operation.
Understood.
I'm breaking contact.
And now, X will be my next target.
The translation of the text isn't any better. Dialogue is wooden and awkward like many of the previous games, and sometimes doesn't even make sense. Like that part with Sigma in the flashback I mentioned, the lead in to that is Sigma saying he's gonna tell Zero a story from the past, and after it's over, Sigma's like, "What? You were a Maverick?" Yeah, you started this conversation. Stuff like that is why the translation of X4 is absolutely terrible. But worry not, my Maverick Hunters, because that doesn't have to be the end of the discussion. As you know, I always play these games on emulators, but the X Legacy Collection on Steam has some decent mods. Chief among them being an interpolation mod to fix the abysmal scaling, but that's not relevant at the moment. I downloaded a retranslated mod for X1 to X3 that updates the scripts of the game to not be so terrible and to reflect the Japanese dialogue more. For X4, you can download the Undub mod, which features the Japanese voices of the characters in gameplay, and I must say, hearing X5, 0, and X4 instead of is pretty cursed at first. But for the cutscenes, they're AI upscaled, feature the Japanese voice tracks, and come with English subtitles. When I first played the Undub mod, I was very surprised. I can't tell you if this acting is good or not by Japanese standards because I don't speak the language. However, because of that, I was able to get into the story of X4. I have a completely different view on X4's story than I did 5 years ago because I experienced it with subtitles and Japanese dialogue. Now, there are issues with the plot that I brought up already, but now I can appreciate the ambition the developers had when writing the story of X4 because these are very interesting conflicts for a Mega Man X game. And when you take away the laughable English acting, you can appreciate where the developers were coming from with this story, since it could have been like X3 where the story is just an excuse for gameplay. But they wanted to take the characters forward by seeing Zero have to face a friend, Colonel, and dealing with Iris turning on him as a result. X's ending is the one that really got to me in Japanese. In English, it's one of the funniest scenes in the game.
Don't ask such a silly question. I'm breaking contact now.
The point of the scene is that across this journey, X has seen so many people who were once good or pretended to be good, like Colonel, Double, and Sigma, who were all Mavericks at the end of the day. Sigma was once his leader, who he's had to fight to the death with several times now. If these people could go Maverick, what's to stop him? He says to Zero, "If I become a Maverick, promise you'll kill me." It's a hard conversation for both of them, but X is valid in thinking about this. The sad rendition of the bombastic opening stage music in both endings really helps sell it.
ゼロ、もし俺がイレギュラー化したら、君が処理してくれ。
バカなこと言ってないで、さっさと戻ってこい。
約束だよ。ゼロ。
So now, when I see these endings, I just think of the deeper character implications that I resonate with pretty well, as opposed to thinking of the terrible delivery of the English script, which is why I have no problem currently saying I enjoy the story of X4, just like how I enjoy pretty much everything about X4. The conclusion for this game really can't be that long, simply because it's all here, it's all been said. The game has fantastic level design, excellent boss design, appealing visuals, good music, the fantastic Zero gameplay, great armor upgrades for X, an ambitious story. It's got everything I need to say a game's perfect. For me, perfection is more about the experience than it is the flaw count. I hope that's clear by now. For me, all 4 of these games are perfect, but I have things I don't like about every single one. But you know, it's perfect for me. I didn't even bring a big speech for this video, because on that front, everything's been said as well. I reflected on how it's been 5 years since the X retrospective started and how much has changed since then in the X1 video. In the X2 video, I've talked about how much I changed as a creator over the years, and in X3, I just told my personal story with the game. X4 is a game I hold as dear as X3, there just isn't as much of a story to tell. I mean, my opinion on this game has changed so little that the title is the same as the one from 5 years ago. It had perfect in it, and I was going with the perfect theming for these videos, thought it would make sense. I think the original video is terrible. I mean, the footage is blurry and gross, but most importantly, the voiceover sounds awful. I manually slowed it down in the editing software to address the criticism that I talked too fast in the original X2 video. The end result is pretty atrocious. Like I said, given X2 and especially X3's low sales, the developers decided to keep things simple this time around and refine the Mega Man X gameplay. But again, I don't really care. It's just funny to me. Having said all that, there really isn't much else to say. I'm proud of how far my channel has come in these past 5 years, and I hope we get many more to come. I'm also proud of how these videos turned out. I think this mini X re-review project has produced some of my best work. On Patreon, it's a stretch goal for me to do X5 through X8, but I might just take that down and get around to it at a later date. I simply can't do it next for a reason you'll see when the next video comes out. But I do want to talk about X5 to X8 again because I think they deserve the attention I just gave the first 4 games. For a much different reason, but still. Those games are just as, if not more important in my channel's history as the first 4. But only time will tell when and how I will do it. In the meantime, I'm glad you all enjoyed these new videos, and I hope you join me for the exciting project I have lined up to close the year in terms of videos. Thanks everyone for watching, and I'll see you next time. As always, I'd like to thank the patrons who make this video possible. The Tier 2 patrons are getting their names displayed on the screen right now, and the Tier 3 patrons pay extra to get their names read out loud. Those being Caleb Escobar, Chris Delgado, Hazel Zero, RN the Atom, Paragree, The Squeaker Nerd, Protector of Memes, Daxter A. Valancourt, Jepson 2.0, Kaiko Blur, Kyler Lehman, Bo Blocks, Joe, Michael Caboose, Your Boy Joe, Avatar Aiden YT, Icarus 10032, The G Wizard, It's Time to Sue, Uriel Moody, 8-Bit Bio, Myopa Game, Jay Seiya Joe Star, and Lightning Angel Seda. Thanks again.